here in the Middle East. And first up tonight on the lineup, Syria says Israel strikes again. Did their fighter jets hit Assad and Hezbollah targets overnight? The Syrian army says yes, and in line with its policy, Israel is saying nothing. We'll get some insight on what it all means and what Russia has to do with it. Before that, the details from Chloe Liu.
The Israeli border with Syria, usually quiet, has been heating up. According to Arab media, Israeli forces conducted a series of airstrikes in the Damascus area overnight. Israeli aircraft reportedly bombed a military position, possibly a weapons warehouse, near the Syrian capital. Following that strike, Israeli warplanes allegedly blew up a Hezbollah weapons convoy on its way to Lebanon, and Lebanon claims that Israel was operating in its airspace overnight. Local residents say they heard 4 explosions at around 1:15 in the morning. Israel has stated a policy of preventing Hezbollah from getting a hold of advanced arms, but does not comment on such military operations. Syria, however, has confirmed the attack. Allegations of these new airstrikes follow a bout of border skirmishes earlier in the week, as Israel confirmed that it targeted an Islamic State post along the border in response to mortar fire.
We are well prepared on our northern frontier. We will not allow Islamic State or any other faction to establish a presence near our borders under the cover of a war in Syria.
Israel periodically responds to spillover from the Syrian civil war, but intentional fire is far less common.
Joining me first tonight, senior defense correspondent Shai Ben-Ari, and expert on Russian national security, Simon Tsipis. Good evening to you both. Shai, Israel's response, no denial, no confirmation, falls within the standard lines of its policy.
Right, there is basically a policy to not say much when it comes to these kinds of reports. We don't typically see an Israeli confirmation or even any sort of reaction. This one, we aren't talking about actual retaliatory strikes like we have seen a lot of in response to spillover across the border from, say, Syrian regime military strikes. There you actually see a very public tone that Israel tends to take, noting that its sovereignty must be respected and that it won't stand for any violence crossing the border. It's important to remember, Benjamin Netanyahu said very publicly in the past that Israel has operated in the past in Syrian territory to protect what he calls its red line, specifically weapons transfers to Hezbollah, even more specifically air defenses.
In this case, no injuries. That's often the case. Should we read anything into that?
That is an interesting detail here. We've seen over the past year or so, since the increase in the Russian involvement in Syria, we've seen less of these kinds of reports. There was one in February, but we've seen less in relation to past years. There's been some speculation that perhaps because of that increased Russian presence in terms of their own air defense systems, that perhaps Israel has less confidence in its ability to operate over Syrian skies without suffering the consequences. It is known that Russia is very aware of all Israeli aircraft that take off from anywhere in Israel.
Let's look a little closer at that, Simon. A strike, an alleged strike, right in Damascus, another one just outside of Damascus. What are the chances that Russia is not in the loop?
In order to answer this question, we have all to understand what is this Russian S-400 system, anti-ballistic missile system means. It covers almost the whole territory of Israel. Russians even see when our military jets take off and come down. So, in my opinion, the only conclusion that can be made from this event that there is a highly coordinated cooperation between Russian and Israeli air forces. I think Russians knew that Israel is about to make this operation within Syrian territory, and they approved it.
Let's put that question to former Kremlin advisor Alexander Nekrasov, joining us from London. Good evening, Alexander.
Good evening.
So let's get to the point. What do you think? Is Israel cooperating fully with Russia in Syrian skies?
Well, I think that there is a cooperation, obviously, because if the targets are hit in Damascus and beside it, I would think it would be crazy not to be coordinating it with the Russians, because there are anti-aircraft defense systems that would have blown those jets apart.
So, Alexander, if Russia is, of course, the biggest ally of the Assad regime, and Russia is working with Israel, coordinating with Israel to strike Assad targets, there's a little bit of a disconnect there.
Well, when they say Assad targets, I don't think they were Assad targets.
The report, Syrian State TV called it a Syrian military base in Damascus.
Well, what I have heard is that there were objects, these were targets linked to the ISIS. So I don't really think, I think we have a bit of a confusion here. And there would never be a chance. I would absolutely discount any possibility of Russians cooperating with the Israelis to hit Assad's target. That's just impossible.
Alexander, stay with us. What do you think, Simon?
Well, I think all this is a result of major diplomatic efforts which were made during these last 2 years. We know that Bibi Netanyahu was more than 3 times in Moscow last year and this year, and also Russian Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev came to Israel recently. I think all of this is part of military cooperation between Russia and Israel, and I think Russia tries to maneuver. You got the right point that Israel also targeting Hezbollah forces and also Assad regime forces, and Russia keeps quiet about that. I think it tries to maneuver. There is no other thing to do.
Alexander, knowing that Israel's most frequent strikes in Syria are on Hezbollah convoys, another Assad ally, is Russia playing both sides?
Well, Russia is in a difficult situation, let's be honest. We just had Turkey doing, complete turnaround and breaking all agreements with Russia and announcing it's going to depose Assad. President Erdogan suddenly decided to share his thoughts with the world of Assad. And of course, it's a difficult situation, and it changes all the time. So, of course, you have to be flexible in this situation. There are too many sides involved in this conflict for anyone to be, straightforward diplomatic.
Alexander,
you have to maneuver.
Stay with us on exactly that point. Too many sides involved. We're going to go closer in Aleppo in just a moment. Shai Ben-Ari, Simon Tsipis, thanks very much for weighing in tonight. And from there to the most important battle underway inside Syria for the divided city of Aleppo. Over 50,000 civilians have now fled out of the east as the Assad regime makes its way in. And whoever takes control of the city has a much stronger chance of controlling Syria's future. The latest tonight from Denise Wood.
As government forces continue pounding Aleppo, the Russian defense ministry says it is ready to allow aid agencies into eastern parts of the city that have been taken over by regime forces. But the defense ministry is also saying it hasn't received any requests from the United Nations or anyone else to do so. Around 275,000 people are thought to remain in the rebel-held east, including around 100,000 children. The United Nations Children's Agency, UNICEF, says many of them are trapped in a living hell.
Bombs are falling, no place is safe, no place is protected. They also have to deal with so much anxiety coming from their parents, from their families. It's a situation where they're breaking down at all levels.
Reports now emerge that on Wednesday, government forces targeted fleeing citizens, killing at least 45 and injuring dozens.
The regime targeted a group of displaced people who were fleeing from eastern neighborhoods to western neighborhoods. The initial count is more than 45 martyrs, most of whom are women and children, who were trying to escape death in the eastern neighborhoods.
Conditions continue to worsen for those trapped in the city, with the last UN food rations distributed on November 13th. The Red Cross claims around 20,000 people have fled eastern Aleppo since Sunday, as the regime bombardment continues to intensify.
Let's jump back to former Kremlin advisor Alexander Nekrasov. Alexander, so if we're talking Aleppo and the Assad regime and Russia's involvement there, you've been saying often on this show that everybody is and should wait until Trump enters office to act. What we see in Aleppo does not look like waiting.
Well, first of all, I'm quite surprised at the coverage of the situation in Aleppo, at least in Aleppo. And I'm also very disgusted with statements made by UN officials and all those sorts of aid agencies and so on, when they're saying that government forces, Assad's forces, are shooting civilians who are trying to leave eastern Aleppo. Excuse me, this smacks of the most disgusting propaganda imaginable. How on earth can anyone expect the Syrian government forces to shoot civilians when the Russians have made it clear several times that the rebels, the so-called rebels, they're butchers, killers. They are targeting those civilians to believe
Let's pause there. With us here in the studio, Russian national security expert Simon Tsipis. Simon, your take?
I think Aleppo has a highly significant importance for the whole Syrian conflict. The minute Aleppo falls, it would mean a victory for Assad regime.
Does that mean that both sides are willing to do anything to recapture Aleppo?
It looks like Assad regime is willing to do anything. Russia tries to make this more humanitarian than military. If Aleppo falls, it means that Assad stays, and it means also a political and military victory for Russia. And I think all eyes must be concentrated on Aleppo. I think it's a matter of a week, maybe two, that the Aleppo will fall and all the militants will be out of there.
Alexander, are Vladimir Putin and Assad trying to get this done, trying to recapture Aleppo before Trump makes it into office in January?
Well, I first of all think that by capturing Aleppo doesn't at all mean that the civil war will end. I don't understand why we're talking about Aleppo as if everything will change immediately and all the rebels will just simply disappear. No, it won't happen. The point is that Aleppo obviously is an important part of the battle, but it doesn't decide the future of Syria. So I think we should stop talking about this and think about the hostages, because I call them hostages, those civilians that have been kept by those gangsters, terrorists, as hostages.
Well, we won't stop talking about it, but we'll continue asking important questions about it. Alexander Nekrasov in London, Simon Tsipis, thanks very much for this. And we'll move to a story happening here in the West Bank. We'll take you to a major summit underway now in Ramallah. Some 1,400 members of Mahmoud Abbas's Fatah party all gathering to shore up unity and boost Abbas's strength. And that government is extremely divided. Just a short while ago, President Abbas took the stage. Here's some of what he told his supporters.
The Fatah movement will not change its identity or motives for its independent decision. And we'll continue our mission of making our Palestinian people's dream of liberty and statehood and independence a reality in the near future.